You are listening to The Catholic Wire.
Hello, and welcome to The Christian Mother. You are listening to The Catholic Wire. I am your host, Wendy Haught, and I am delighted to be interviewing Sister Jeanne Marie today. Sister is going to share with us her experience teaching grades 5 through 8. She is currently a teacher at Mother Cabrini Academy in Wheat Ridge, Colorado. I think this series that we are going to do on education with the CMD sisters, Congregation Mater Dei sisters, is going to be a real help to parents, whether their children attend a Catholic school or not. It should also be of interest to young people who are considering a religious vocation. Thank you for taking the time to share your thoughts and experience with us, sister.
You're welcome. Good to be here.
Great. Could you please tell us a little bit about yourself and how you came to your vocation?
Yes, I'd be glad to. So I was born in New Zealand.
Oh, wow.
And yeah, I was quite a ways away from here, but United States. My parents decided to immigrate in the early 90s because they wanted us to be a part of a Catholic parish and a school. Mm-hmm. And, leaving our homeland, our culture, our family, it was, a huge sacrifice for my mom and dad. And I remember us being in the airport and saying goodbye to my grandparents.
Oh, no.
And as a child, you just think of silly things like, I can see the color of the carpet in the airport. My. But you know that, you're never going to see it again. And but that sacrifice that my mom and dad made, that was truly, I think, an example. Their example fueled my vocation.
Right. Absolutely.
Because I could tell that, they weren't just doing it for, to try out America. Or to try another country. It was a matter of they were leaving everybody. So all our family, our, close family, all lived in New Zealand. My parents, brothers and sisters, my aunts and uncles, my cousins. So after that, when we left, it was just goodbye after that. So, yeah.
Oh, my. So tell me again, what age did you say you were when you left?
I was 8 years old.
8.
So,
okay.
Yes.
Oh, my goodness. And so how long were you in America, or did you go directly to Omaha, or what was your route there to get to the convent?
So Mom and Dad decided to go up to Idaho, and where the city of Mary is, Father Benedict's parish. Mm-hmm. And we went to St. Teresa's school there till 8th grade. And then as we all got beyond 8th grade, we would go to high school at Mount St. Michael's. Or just homeschool. So at the time when I came to be in high school, I just homeschooled. And then for my 11th grade year, I went down to Omaha. And it was sort of then when I got to know the bishop and the sisters a little bit more, being around them and feeling the sense of being needed was so comforting for me. And he's always a father figure to everybody, the bishop. And so leaving my parents, my mother had actually gone to back to New Zealand with my 2 younger sisters at the time, when I went to Omaha for 11th grade. And then my dad stayed in the United States, and he was working and, sending her money as he could.
Right.
Because it was always financially difficult growing up in another country and having to deal with all that. So, yeah, we had a year in Omaha. And then after that, I did go back to New Zealand for my last high school year, and I homeschooled.
Well, that was a happy reunion with family.
Yes, it was. I got to see my mom and sisters and a brother and some cousins again. And it is interesting when you go back to be with your family that you can tell, oh, I do belong to them, even though I've been gone 10 years.
Right. So when you were at Omaha, were you boarding at the convent?
I was. I was one of 4 boarders at the time. 3 other girls, 2 of them were sisters, and then another young girl from another area. And we didn't know each other before then. So when we came to board together, it was like, oh, okay. Get to know new people.
Substitute family, your new family.
It is. It was at the time.
And were you milking cows at the time?
No, we didn't actually have cows there yet. So, but we picked cherries, and we picked corn, and we picked apples, and all those sorts of fun things.
Right.
So,
okay. So, did you know when you decided to take your vows, or am I saying that right? I don't know all the correct terminology, but did you know that you wanted to be a teacher, or did you have any idea what your life would be in the convent?
I knew that the sisters taught, but I never really connected the I will be a sister, therefore a teacher sort of connection in my mind. It was more, I wanted to do what the sisters were doing, whatever that meant. If it meant, praying or being a part of what they were, just was exciting, and it meant that I was needed. And being needed is a very, I think, strong part of all of us. We want to be needed and loved. And I think that will come into play as we start talking about classrooms, how much children are also so much like that. They want to be needed and loved.
Right. So after you took your initial vows, or what do you call that?
Yes, we take our vows.
A novitiate. How long, at what stage do they decide you're going to be a teacher or start training, or how does that work? What's that whole process for any young women out there who might be considering a vocation?
Well, there are three things that make a good teacher. One is the ability to do the work. The second is the personality, to be able to function with the children and communicate and all that. And the third is the preparation, to be able to prepare for the work that's to be done. And if you can do those three things well, even in a secular life and a married life, then you can do them well as a teacher from the get-go. There are tons to learn, obviously in between. But if you have those three things, then, it can be God's will for you that you do a teaching job and are able to persevere in that. So,
right. So is every sister the same as far as how soon they go into teacher training, or is it an individual thing?
With our congregation, it's mostly based on the need. I know that when I started teaching, we just opened a brand new school out in Burlington, Colorado. And I started with 4 children in my class. And I think Sister Maria Josepha, she had 9 students. And now they've grown to 65 in the school.
Wow.
So they've come and they have a brand new school, and everything's grown and it's beautiful there now. And we had.
I know there's a great need, because I hear about it all the time at the different chapels, how much they want to have a school. So, so can you tell me something about your training, what you learned specifically? Sure. Okay.
Yeah, so my first mission was Burlington, and coming out there, I had 4 girls, and they were, I believe, 4th, 5th, and 6th graders. So I had different things that I taught, so different subjects for the major subjects like math and English and those things. But the other subjects like science and history, we could combine and do together. And that's very helpful, because obviously as one teacher with many different grades, you can't cover everything individually.
Okay, so you're saying you were on the job training. You were,
yes,
and you
I
worked with another sister who has more experience, and so it's kind of like an apprenticeship. Is that? Am I getting that right?
It was. I actually was sort of, booted out of the nest, if you want to put it that way. As I went. It was sort of an interesting thing, because I went from novitiate the day I took my first vows, which is when you receive your black veil and you go into your religious life with vows. That day I actually flew out to go visit my family for a week and then come back and start teaching right away.
Oh, goodness.
So I was in the classroom right away. But as I say that, over time, as we went through the months of the year and throughout the years, the teacher that was the superior, I would go to her for all the questions that I had, and also sometimes go to the parents, because, they've been there, done that with some of their older children. And so they knew things that were helpful for me as a younger person.
Oh, okay.
and having their input on, oh, this is how my child learns, for me was very helpful and insightful as a younger teacher. Now, I will say there are many mistakes made because you're brand new, such as, oh, I need to grade papers after 2 weeks of, teaching. And it wasn't that I didn't know what they were doing. It was just, oh, I have to grade those papers. Right.
Right.
And
Oh.
so, little things that you learn that perhaps I would have known had I had more quote unquote training. But like our bishop always teaches, he says, you need to open schools now because the children are there now and they're ready to be taught now. Mm-hmm. And so we go into it pretty much, fresh out of the nest. Some of our other sisters have gotten a little more, one-on-one training, being in the classroom with another teacher, especially if they're, let's say, from another country. Mm-hmm. So like one of our sisters from Germany, she was with another one of our sisters helping with kindergarten and first grade, but she hadn't always known English. So she needed that guidance and she wasn't used to the culture and the way things were done. So
in those initial years, what was the most helpful thing that you learned?
To be communicative, especially with parents. Our bishop always says you shouldn't come to the end of the quarter and the child has an F in a grade. They should know, the parents should be very well aware how their students are doing very often. Mm-hmm. Like, you annoy them so much, you're calling them every night, and you're telling them how they do, and that's what I want to hear. So, obviously that's a little exaggerated, but we do, for me, over the years, that has become very helpful.
Yes, that I can see where that would be exceedingly helpful to keep the parents informed of where the student is so that they can be helping out at home, dealing with, see if they can figure out what the issue is on their end too. Mm-hmm. Okay.
Yes.
So right now you're teaching grades 5 through 8. Is that correct?
Yes. Well, I have 7th graders and 9th and 10th graders, but I have taught the 5th through 8th before. And
oh, that's right. That's right. Yeah. I got that confused. Okay. So in what age do you teach boys and girls together?
We do in our smaller schools, because it's just not practical to have them separated.
Right.
And a lot of the smaller schools, the children are related. So we'll have brothers and sisters and,
okay,
cousins sometimes. In our larger schools, we do segregate for obvious reasons. The children are maturing. And we usually segregate in 7th grade, sometimes 6th, depending on how the teachers work out. But 6th or 7th grade on up, we split them up.
So what is the most common difficulty you encounter teaching this age group, and how do you manage it?
Well, I think there's that tendency to always be the one on top, be looked at, be loved, be, have that I'm the best kind of attitude. And you do have to keep an eye on that. And there has to be, either consequences if there's too much, I guess you could call it pride or whatever. They like to be the one on top. And a lot of times the boys are that way. And that's where
I can see that being the
find the difficulty. They want to make,
girls have a different way, but
they do. And sometimes they get jealous of each other or jealous of, sister's time with so-and-so and so you have to sort of, keep an eye on those sorts of things too.
Right. And I'm always reading that girls are more naturally suited to the discipline of a classroom than boys are. So I kind of feel like boys often act out a little bit more because it's not as easy for them to sit there as girls. But.
Yes, they can be that way, yes.
Is there anything parents can implement in their child training that would minimize this problem?
I guess having that open communication, like I was talking about with, the teacher and vice versa. And sometimes there can be, fear with the teacher, like, oh, I don't want to mention about so-and-so to their parents because they might get angry. And there's always that, sometimes there's difficulty and maybe the parents can be, well, they're always talking about my so-and-so and why are they always, why are they always picking on them and picking that and picking that? And sometimes you'll get a little bit of that. But when there is a difficulty, And, the parents can't always be there to see it, but making them aware and where they can help the teacher through it, and vice versa, the teacher can help the parent through it, then it's, a whole lot easier.
Okay.
But yeah.
Sister, how do you handle discipline in the classroom?
So in our classrooms, we have, the biggest discipline is keeping a set schedule. That's been very helpful for myself, keeping the classes to their times, because there's been a lot of times where you run over on a class because, the time's not there and you need to teach more. You have to be flexible, but you also have to be diligent about keeping the times of the day. Especially, I would find in the first 2 weeks of the school year. That's sort of where we are right now in our first 2 weeks of the school year. And I have to be like a mother bear in the classroom, especially right now. And when they understand what I want and how I expect it from them, then they live up to that for the rest of the year. That's how important those first 2 weeks of school are.
Okay.
As far as, keeping the times of the day. And then as far as discipline within the day, like if students are acting out, or let's say homework isn't finished, then you find a consequence that works. It doesn't matter that it's a simple consequence or a large consequence, but that's consistent and that the child knows, sister will do this every single time I do that. Right. There was an interesting little advice that was given to me by a sister, and she said, don't say if it happens, such as homework isn't done or somebody acts out, but when it happens, what are you going to do? So just expect it to happen, and then you're ready. And, that goes back to the preparation, being prepared to deal with it when it happens, and then trust that God will smooth the rest out. Mm-hmm. And I found that over my teaching years is there are difficulties, you get over them and you keep on. And that's been so helpful.
Right. You just mentioned over the years, and I thought I never did ask you how long you've been teaching.
I've been teaching for about 18 years.
Oh, that's a good long time.
Yes, it's been, a lot of years. It's sort of funny when you start to think about it. Wow, that's been a long time.
Yeah. So yeah. You've probably been training other sisters to teach.
Yes, there a couple of other parishes that I was in. The sisters will come and say, sister, what should I do here? I was trying to help the student with this, and you say, a lot of times you just go back to the basic principles: be consistent and be consistent. And but yeah, it's neat to hear their questions, because I remember myself being there in those early days, like, how should I do this? What should I do? And all the other sisters were there to help me.
So do y'all, you can tell I'm from the South.
Yes.
Does the congregation get together to discuss teacher issues on a regular basis, or do you just pretty much handle it on your own individually, with the sister closest to you, or just one that you've worked out a relationship with, where you help each other, or how does that go?
Most of the time we work closely with each other within our parishes, but then we also get the guidance of our priests in our parishes. And the priestly guidance is so crucial, because they know the families maybe perhaps more than we do, because they're a little, closer to their lives, been to their houses, visited with them maybe more than we have, and can understand the situation. And so, besides asking each other, we can also go to him for help. So that's very, very helpful.
Okay. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. That really does add a lot of help there, because you're right. They do have those more extensive relationships, and can give you good advice about that.
Yes.
So we're talking about, just a reminder, we're talking about grades 5 through 8. So what would you advise parents to correct firmly and consistently in this age group? Or do you think we've really covered that with the what you've said earlier about the consistency and consequences?
Well, let's see. Children that are older, when you start to teach them, you obviously need to have obedience. But older children don't like to obey because they love their teacher. In other words, when you have the kindergarten through first, second, third, they want to do it because sister said to do it, and I love sister, and I want to do it because she told me to. When you get into the junior high area, it starts to become a question of why should I do that? Why do I have to do that, sister? And so there's a lot of becauses that have to come out as well in the junior high and that area. My favorite one is because I said so. And that was actually advised by I think it's a child psychologist, John Roseman. He does some great books by, one of them is called Ending the Homework Hassle. And we've given those out to parents before just to help them understand where we're coming from and how they can manage the child at home. And
I'm sorry, sister, could you repeat the name of the book?
Yes, it's called Ending the Homework Hassle.
Oh, Ending the Homework Hassle by John Rosemond?
Yes.
Okay.
And so he speaks of letting the train hit the child. And I think that applies very, very well to junior high. And what that means is when the child does not put forth their effort and wants to always be enabled, either be enabled by their teacher or enabled by their friends or enabled especially by their parents. Mom, I need a pencil. Mom, I didn't have the paper. I couldn't do the homework.
Oh.
Mom, you forgot my lunch. When those things are enabled by the parent, then the child doesn't feel that it's their responsibility.
Okay.
And the teacher, especially in the classroom, if that's not been done at home, it has to be done by the teacher in the classroom. And that's when, if they don't get homework done, then there has to be those consequences of let the train hit them. Oh, you just got a 0 because you didn't do anything.
Right.
And obviously that's harsh as far as, giving a 0 right away for just one warning. But after, repeated warnings and repeated time and, they knew they should do it, there has to be some kind of consequence of, do you know what that 0 means to your report card? But that can be applied at home as well for parents, just, you thought that you were going to go over to your friend's house tonight. Well, you didn't clean your bedroom yesterday, so sorry, right. And that's a let the train hit them sort of an idea there. But back to, yes, having them, giving them the reasons why they have to do something, especially in the junior high, is very good for them because it becomes more of a reasonable thing to do versus I did it for love.
Okay.
And as we grow older, we like to do things for a reason or have a good reason for doing something.
Yes, we do.
Why do we have to raise our hand? Because we are a small image of a society. We're a small image of a city, of a civilization in miniature. And so when we all work together, and we can't just all call out at the same time, so therefore we need to raise our hand so we can be heard.
We're going to pause for a short break right now, and then you will rejoin us at the Catholic Wire, and this is the Christian Mother Show. We're talking with Sister Jeanne Marie with the Congregation Mater Dei Sisters.
In the Catholic Wire, we greatly appreciate your questions and stories, and we would like to feature them on the air. If you have anything you would like to share, please send it as a voice message, and we may select it to appear in our podcast.
So, Sister, I really appreciated hearing what you were talking about just now before the break with not enabling the children by letting them get away with different excuses. Am I understanding that right? Like if they keep saying, well, I can't do my homework because I didn't have the assignment or I didn't have a pencil or whatever. Is that enabling?
Yes. That would be an example of, enabling the child instead of, guiding them to realize that they are very capable and able and have a brain that God gave them to reason things out for themselves.
So the corresponding virtue that the parents would need to be teaching at home would be taking responsibility. Is that right?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. And that could be done in very early ages at home.
Like starting with chores when they're really small, or?
Yes, and instead of becoming a perpetual nag about, certain other chores, but having a chore chart at home is very helpful. Just like we have in the classroom a chore chart, to have those things, and they can check it off. Like, oh, you did your chore? Okay, check.
Okay.
And it becomes their responsibility. So,
very good. Okay. Looking at the individual student's academic formation as a whole, how do you keep the class moving forward and yet recognize the individual strengths and weaknesses of each child?
I find with the more I teach that, and I think perhaps it was always there, just not as well used, that there's a mother's intuition that you bring into the classroom as a teacher.
Mm-hmm.
And moms and dads would have this too, is where's my child thought? In the classroom, as far as the children go, you keep the class's attention by becoming somewhat of an actress or an actor in the classroom. I have found that, if you're good at coming up with fun stories and being excited about what you do, then they become excited too. And, if you start noticing children in their seats being antsy, maybe send them to go get something. Maybe say, okay, we'll go take a break now. Or you notice a child that maybe is sighing or their faces are showing a struggle. You walk over there and you try to look and see what is it that they're struggling with. Mm-hmm. And that means a lot to a child. A teacher once taught me, sometimes it doesn't mean that you actually help them at all. Sometimes it may mean you walk up to their desk and you say, I really like the color that you used right there. It looks really nice. And in that way, you're being a positive influence and saying, oh, sister really liked that. And I'm going to do that again.
So you're realizing that they may need confidence or just a feeling that they are loved and cared for, and to get over an insecurity or something about how they feel about their work.
Yes, they may be afraid to come to you and say, I need help with this. Mm-hmm. So you go to them and you say something that you liked, and then they might say to you, oh, but I didn't understand this. It's sort of a reaction or a...
Right, and that saves them from drawing attention to themselves when they're feeling unsure by having to, call you, raise their hand or go to your desk or whatever.
Yes, sometimes even raising their hand. I've had a student before who struggles with raising their hand. They don't want to look like they need help. But what I notice is they sort of shuffle in their seat and they look up at me and they just look at me. And I can tell, so-and-so, are you having troubles there? And most of the time it's a yes. But they struggle with, should I raise my hand? And that's most of the time children don't have that issue, but this particular child does. And so it's kind of interesting that I feel that, motherly intuition, and I see that with the children. And I love how God gives us that, ability to see that.
Right. And they're learning empathy. I mean, you're modeling empathy for them as well. So that's really wonderful.
Yes. And they will do it to others.
Mm-hmm.
Exactly.
How much of a role does your understanding of the temperaments, the 4 temperaments, guide your teaching? Or is it really most helpful in your individual interactions with students?
I find that having, like myself, I have a general idea of the temperaments, and it's a big help. With the different temperaments, you have different children reacting different ways to different situations, and also to the way that you react, because you have a temperament as well that comes into that classroom.
Oh, yes.
And my initial, I think, teaching years were very unconfident of what I was doing. Of course, you don't know everything yet, and you don't want to do something wrong.
Right.
I think maybe I'm a little bit, melancholic in that way, is where I don't want it to be wrong, and therefore you don't try, or you don't do enough. And there'll be students that are that way too. It's like, it's okay if you don't put everything. And when you give them, that sort of knowledge of their work, for the melancholics in the classroom, then they go, oh, okay, it's okay to not do everything. Right, that's okay. And so they need to have that assurance.
Yes.
Oh, a priest once told me, he said, identification is the first step forward with, if you can identify for the child their struggles, or you yourself as a teacher can identify the different temperaments within your classroom right away, then you can have a good chemistry. I've heard a book compare the classroom to an engine. You have different parts that do different things. And then when that engine is humming and working, all the children are doing their best in their own in their own way, however their temperament works out. So, yeah.
Oh, I love that idea.
Yeah, I did too when I read it. I thought that's really neat to think of.
Can you help the parents understand how best to work with the child's temperament at home so that he may do his best in school?
Well, not having a great, knowledge of the temperaments as, someone who would have studied them before, just noticing their different strengths and weaknesses. If they tend to be lazy, you have to try to give them things to do that don't overburden them, but still help them to work hard and to see the reward of that work. Children who tend to be the ones in charge, like the cholerics, and want to tell everybody else what to do, you have to say, that's my job. I can give punishments and I can tell so-and-so when they're doing something wrong. Or, sometimes the little choleric ones want to tell the big older ones what to do, and then the big older ones react, don't tell me what to do.
Right.
And so that can be a good trait too, as we know, having that strength too.
Well, Sister, is there anything that we haven't discussed that you would like to cover now?
There were a couple of things. When we discussed the virtues of children in the 7th and 8th grade, one thing I wanted to mention was children at this age should especially be encouraged to start practicing self-denial. And in younger grades, you have things you work with obedience, and you work with teaching them not to lie or not to cheat, or those very, things that must be, obvious difficulties. But then the children who are in the older grades, now you want to start them practicing virtue in the positive light. What can I do to gain graces? And self-denial is a good one because it's a huge sign of maturity. Of course, too much, if they want to, start sleeping on nails, that would be, you have to watch those types of things. But one of our students wanted to give something up for Lent, and she chose to giving up looking at herself in the mirror. And I thought that was a pretty neat idea.
Yes.
And she would see herself sometimes in the glass as she drove to school, and she's like, I saw my face in the glass when I was coming to school. I'm like, oh yeah, you have to, just look down, or, so many things come to your mind that you never would have thought of when you offer something up. And another virtue that is wonderful to be guided by parents is a lively faith. Parents can guide children to remember God's divine providence in their own personal lives, and going into the teenage years and growing up, and all for the goal of, obviously, as we all should have, living for eternity. I have one of our parents, he likes to teach his children, and he has a basketball team, to go into beast mode, BEAST, beast mode. And what it stands for them is be a saint mode. So when you're pushing, you're striving, you're forcing yourself to, do the best that you can. And that's where the BEAST stands for. And I thought, what a neat thing to remember for children. It sounds, very secular, beast mode. Oh, be like a fighter. It's like,
right.
Yeah, but this is be a saint. And
that's fabulous.
It's so neat. Yeah. Where they're not so much acting out of force, like being forced to be good, or forced to pray, or forced to do these things, but they're acting from a sense of duty. Like, this is your job now.
Yes.
This is what you need to do.
It sounds like knighthood.
Yes. That is very much something that we try to, do the chivalrous and the things that they would do. So, yeah.
So to wrap up, what 3 practical things would you most like parents to take away from today's conversation?
The three things that I thought were very important to be remembered were, one, prayer, because prayer can keep us, in that state of mind to keep ourselves going as parents and as teachers. But then also realizing that if God has given us the vocation, the second virtue would be confidence. Having the confidence knowing that if you were given this job by God to be a parent, to be a teacher, that you will be given the grace and the ability to do that job. You may not be perfect at everything, but you will do it in your own way. And that was something that was told to me by a teacher once. She said, you may not do it the way so-and-so does it, but you will do it in your own way. And realizing that, God allows us to do it in our own way.
Right.
And giving us that opportunity. And the last thing that I would advise is perseverance. As we go into the age of the world as we know it right now, is perhaps, very scary times coming up, but we persevere and stay close to our friends. Having good friends, a good friends group is very helpful. A good parent group that that can keep you persevering. Then that's very, very helpful. So,
Right. Very, very good advice all around. Well, thank you so much, Sister Jeanne Marie, for visiting with us this afternoon on The Christian Mother. I want to thank everyone for listening and share with you that this show is under the patronage of St. Anne. If you have found this show interesting, please subscribe to our channels and share with your friends, both within and without the church. We greatly appreciate your questions, comments, and stories. To be featured in our podcast, please send us a voice message. You may also contact us through the webpage at thecatholicwire.org. Remember that our work will grow and continue, first through the grace of God, and secondly through your cooperation, both material and spiritual. And thank you again, Sister Jeanne Marie. It was a pleasure.
You're welcome. Mine too.
God bless you. And hopefully we'll have you back again. We'll talk about something new.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you for listening to the Catholic Wire. If you have found this show helpful, please say a prayer for all our collaborators. Don't forget to subscribe to our channels and share with your friends. For questions and comments, you may contact us at thecatholicwire.org.